On Daf Memamid Beis, we're discussing why is it that the Birchas Kohanim in the Mikdash was one long bracha without any interruptions in between, whereas in Gvul and outside the Mikdash, there was an Amen after each of the three brachos. But Kol Kach Lama, how do we justify that distinction between Birchas Kohanim in the Mikdash and outside the Mikdash? Lefisha ein onim on Amen b'Mikdash. And the Gemara in a minute is going to derive and try to explain why we don't recite Amen in the Mikdash. In Gvulin, there are three brachos, and each bracha generates its own chiyuv Amen. And the Amen, therefore, divides the three bracha, the one bracha into three. And the Mefarshim asked the following question: L'chora, it's topsy-turvy here. You're putting the wagon before the horse. Why? Because the reason why we have Amen three times is because there are three different brachos. But here the Gemara is assuming no, it really fundamentally should be one bracha, and it's only because of Amen that we divide into three brachos. And that's not our simple understanding that to say that Aniyas Amen is the gorem for chiluk habrachos. Now, let's mention here that in Masechet Tainis Daf Tes Zayin, the Gemara makes it clear that instead of Amen in the Beis HaMikdash, the response was Baruch Shein Kvod Malchuso Liolam Voed. And we're going to see this here in our Gemara as well. So Tosas Divrei Maskil V'Chol raises the following question. This Aniyah of Baruch Shein Kvod Malchuso, etc., is longer than Amen. And if that be the case, then in truth, there is a longer hefsek in the Beis HaMikdash between one bracha and the other. The Gemara seems to assume that on the contrary, because since in the Mikdash they don't say Amen, it's all one bracha achas in the Mikdash. But it really seems like instead of Amen, they substitute Baruch Shein Kvod Malchuso, and it's an even greater hefsek, splitting the brachos into three. And Tosas answers that the people would not wait the people who were responding Baruch Shein Kvod Malchuso would not wait until the pasuk was completed, but immediately when they heard the name of Hashem in the Mikdash, they would recite Baruch Shein Kvod Malchuso. So there was never a hefsek between one pasuk and the other. So therefore, it's considered like one long bracha. What's the source? Shenemet pasuk in Nehemiah, the Periktes, the Leviim would cry out to the people in the Beis Hamikdash, Kumu, Baruch Hu es Hashem Elokeichem min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam. So we see that every bracha that they were mevarach in the Mikdash, the people themselves, they used this nusach. For example, let's say the first bracha of Shmon Esrei is Magen Avram. So when they got to the siyum of the bracha of Magen Avram, they would say Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam Magen Avram. Same thing with Mechayim Mesim and all the brachos. And this is what the pasuk in Nehemiah is talking about, that the Leviim would turn to the people of the Beis HaMikdash and say that your bracha should always end with Min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam. U'minayin shall call brachu bracha. How do you know that in every bracha that they recite in the Mikdash, we do not respond Amen? And the Meiri writes, why don't we respond Amen? Because the Tehillah, which we're about to see, is even greater. It's Yoser Ma'ula than Amen. Amen is like, the end of a bracha. And it's very inappropriate to say that Amen, we achieved the end of the bracha. Ein sof leberchosav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore they were machmir that when the name of Hashem, the Shem first, was mentioned, they shouldn't say Amen. So what should they say instead? Tehillah. What is this Tehillah? This Tehillah, this praise is Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Olam Va'ed Shenemar, as it says in that same pasuk in Nehemiah. The end of that pasuk is Yivarechu Shem Kvodecha. So after the bracha was recited, then the tzibur would be mevarech Shem Kvodecha. That's the indication of this pasuk, Yivarechu Shem Kvodecha, and they would recite Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Olam Va'ed. And the end of this pasuk in Nehemiah, umeromem al kol bracho tehillah. They shouldn't just complete the brachos with Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusa one time, but rather al kol bracho tehillah. Al kol brachu bracha tein lo tehillah. You should recite and respond with Baruch Shem Kvod Malchusa Olam Va'ed for each bracha. So there was no takon of Hamiras Amen in the Mikdash on any bracha. And even on Birchas Kohanim, they would not respond with Amen. And therefore there was no hefsek, breaking up the brachos into three, and they're all considered like one bracha. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Mem Amid Beis. The Mishnah is going to discuss the entire Seder, which led up to the Kriyas HaTorah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Birchos Kohen Gadol Ketzad. So that the brachas of the Kohen Gadol, when he got to read the Torah, would be the finale of an entire step-by-step process. What was that process? Chazan HaKnesses. Okay, this is like the lowest level of the levels that we're going up to, that reaches all the way to Kohen Gadol at the top of the pyramid. Who is the Chazan HaKnesses? He's the Shamash. He's Memuna B'Beis HaKnesses in the Azorah to make sure that the Sefer Torah is taken out and it's spread on the Teva, and he prepares all the necessities for the Beis HaKnesses. So we start with him on the bottom of the Torah pole, Notel Sefer Torah. He takes out the Sefer. V'nosna, now we get to the next level up, LeRosh HaKnesses, right? This is the person who's the chief gabbai of the Beis HaKnesses in the Azorah, in the Beis HaMikdash, and nothing happens without his approval. He will decide who the Shliach Tzibur was, who will recite Maftir the Navi, and so forth and so on. Okay, so we're up to the Rosh HaKnesses. Now we get to the next level. Rosh HaKnesses Nosel Iskan. Who is the Skan Kohen Gadol? What was his purpose? That in case, an event, the Chas V'Sholom, the Kohen Gadol would have a tumah on Yom Kippurim, he would fill in. He was like the next on line, in the bullpen, and he would do the Avodas Yom Kippurim. And he's the highest of these three levels, Vaskan, and he passes on the Sefer Torah, Nosnol Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol Omeid, and we'll see the Gemara's Medayik here from the Mishnah that he was sitting, which is a problem because there's no yeshiva in the Azor. But anyway, he stood up. Umekabel, and he receives the Sefer Torah from the Skan. The Koreh, and he reads the following. First and foremost, he reads the Seder Avodas Yom Kippurim in Parshas Achremos, and then he goes on to read Parshas Emor, which is called Ach Be'asor, which describes the mitzvos of Yom Kippurim. Now, he completes that kriya of Ach Be'asor and Golil es Torah. And then he winds up the Sefer Torah Manicha B'Cheko, and he holds it in his hand next to his chest. And he turns to the people. The Omer, and he declares in front of them, Yoser Mimasha Karasi Lifnechem Kosem Kan. This Sefer Torah has a lot more than what I read to you. Why? Because he's going to now read from Parshas Pinchas, which is Be'asor LaChodesh HaShvi, and the people are going to think, why is he rolling up the Sefer Torah when he still has reading to be read? Maybe the Sefer Torah is possible. Maybe it's missing a parsha. Now, in truth, they're not going to bring a second Sefer Torah for the Kohen Gadol to read Parshas Pinchas, but also Chodesh Hashvi. He's going to read it Baal Peh, which is itself a problem. How can you read Torah Shebechsav Baal Peh? But in any event, they did this, and we'll see why in just a second. But it was important for the Kohen Gadol to notify the people that there's no psul in the Sefer Torah. Shelo yotziu laz ala Sefer Torah, and they're going to say that this Sefer is possible and it's missing a parsha. Therefore, he tells them, you should know that there's a lot more in this Sefer Torah than what I read to you. But then he reads the parsha Pinchas Basar LaChodesh Hashvi Baal Peh, Shebechuma Hashpkudim, which is in Bamidbar, and Kori Baal Peh. So the Rishonim ask, how are you allowed to read Baal Peh? The Gemara says in Gittin Daf Samach, Dvarim Shebechsav Iyat HaRashay L'Omer Baal Peh, and the Tosi Yishonim in Yoma on Daf Ayin in the name of his Rebbe, and the Tosa Rosh, they give the following answer: that when it says Dvarim Shebechsav Iyat HaRashay L'Omer Baal Peh, that's only L'Mitzvah Min HaMuvchar. But if there's an inyan of Kavod HaTzibur, like in our case, as we'll see, they were matir reading it Baal Peh. Right, there are other answers to this question, but okay. Now, umavarech alea shmona brachos. So again, by reading Baal Peh, he saves the tzibur the time that it would take to be golel the sefer. And then when he finishes his kriya, the last of which is from Chumash Pekudim, and that's Baal Peh, mevarech ala Torah shmona brachos. What are the Shmona Brachos? Number one, ala Torah, right? Every Kriyas HaTorah requires a bracha lachareha, asher nosan lanu to semes chaylim, etc. The ala avoda, he finishes the avoda and he recites the bracha of Ritzei b'Amcha Yisrael, and he says v'tirtza avoda b'dvir beisecha, and then he finishes the bracha oscha levadcha b'yira nava. The Al Hodoyah, he recites the bracha of Modim Anachnu Loch, finishing up with Hatov Shimcha L'chon El Eldos, because of the completion of his avodah. And there's no avodah without Odah, as the Gemara derives in Masechet Megillah Daf Yud Ches from the pasuk Zoveach Toda Yichabdonini, and after Zvicha, which is Zoveach Toda, then Hodah comes. This is the middle bracha of Shmona Esrei on Yom Kippurim, and it begins with Atav V'Chartonu, and it ends with the Chasim of Melech Mochel V'Solech Avnoseinu Lavonis Amo Beis Yisrael. Number 5, V'Yala Migdash, and the Chasim is Baruch Atah Asher Bochar B'Migdash. And then number 6, now it's a Tefillah Al Yisrael. And the Rambam writes that Shioshi Hashem is Yisrael, v'lo yoser mehem melech. And the Chasim is Baruch HaBocher B'Ama Yisrael. Number 7, V'ala Kohanim, and he prays on behalf of the Kohanim, and he completes that with Baruch Shebochar B'Zaro Shel Aaron. And finally, the 8th bracha is Mispal Yerushalayim. Vashar Tefillah. Not clear what the shar. What does the word shar mean? Let me just see. the Al Yerushalayim, and he recites Baruch HaBocher b'Yushalayim. You have chosen Yushalayim, Vashar Tefillah, and the blessing for the rest of the prayer. That doesn't help me that much. Let's see the note here. He quotes a Gemara in Samaches, Yuma, and it says Val Shar Hatfila. And this blessing contained the rest of the individual and general prayers that were pertinent at that time, and concludes Baruch, etc., Shomer Tefillah, who hears prayer. So there seems to be some sort of a general bracha, or in the language of the Mishnah, tefillah. Yeah, but that would jack up the number from 8 to 9. Oh, he says that according to some versions, we omit the clause for Yerushalayim. And this clause is actually omitted in the Brisa Masechet Yomi on Daf Ayin. But Rashi does mention the blessing for Yerushalayim, and it's also listed in the Brisa on Daf Mem Amud Aleph we didn't get to. So according to this version, when the Mishnah says V'hashar Tefillah for the rest of the prayer, the Mishnah does not mean to count this as one of the blessings. Rather, it means that following the 8 blessings, he concludes with general prayers and recites another blessing at the conclusion of those prayers. And now we're up to the Gemara. Shamet Minah, from the fact that it says that when the Kohen Gadol received the Sefer Torah, he would stand. No, I'm sorry, we're not up to that yet. I jumped the gun. From the fact that in the presence of the Kohen Gadol, they passed the Sefer Torah from the Chazan to the Rosh Knesses to the Sgan, giving each one kavod, is cholkin kavod tamim mokum rav. Amar Abaye kula kvod kohen gadol hu. The fact that they give it one to the other, going up in this hierarchy, that's in honor of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol omeid makabel Torah, the Koreh. So the Gemara says, omeid michlal di yoshev hu. How could he be sitting? V'amar mar. We have a statement. Ein yeshiva v'azara. That it is, so if we assume that the Kohen Gadol read the Sefer Torah in the Azara, how was it that he was sitting in the Azara? Ela malchei beis David bilvad. Only kings of the Davidic dynasty were permitted to sit in the Azara. It's unbefitting to the honor of heaven to sit in the temple courtyard, in the Azara. Even the heavenly ministers are not permitted to sit there, meaning the angels. And this is based, as Rashi quotes a pasuk in Yeshaya and another pasuk in Daniel. The heavenly angels stood above to serve him. And I approached one of those angels who stand. Now, mutar lemalchei beis David leishev sham. They can sit in the Azara, the malchei beis David. Shecholak lem hamakom kavod kidei laharos shemalchusam shlema. They have a complete malchus. Malchus beis David is called the Kisei Hashem in a pasuk in Divrei Yomim Aleph Perikov Tes, Vayoshev Shlomo al Kisei Hashem, And that's the matir for the Malchus Beis David, the Malchus Beis David, to sit in the Azor. Shenemar, Vayova Poskin Shmuel Beis, Vayova Melch David Vayeshev Lifnei Hashem, Vayomer Mi Anochi. So even though it's Lifnei Hashem, which means it had Kedushas Azora, again, this is before the building of the Mikdash, it was nevertheless mutter for David Melch to sit there. But other people, even a Kohen Gadol, is not allowed to sit in the Azora. So how could the Kohen Gadol in our Mishnah sit in the Azora before the Kriyas HaTorah? And the Gemara answers, you know what? You're right. In the Azora, Kohen Gadol is enjoined from sitting. But that's only what we call the Ezras Yisrael, or the Ezras Kohanim. That's the Mokom Roy Lavoda. But in the Ezras Noshim, She'eino Ru'ui Lavoda, there's not a Kedusha of an Azora. It really has the same status as Harabayis, and therefore you're allowed to sit in Harabayis. And the Kriya of the Kohen Gadol, the Gemara is going to argue, took place not in the Ezras Kohanim or the Ezras Yisrael, but rather in the Ezras Noshim. Kedomer of Chizda, we'll see later on, that the Ezras Noshim, the Kriyas HaTorah, took place in the Ezras Noshim, which, as we said before, has the status of Harabayis, and there's no Isi Yeshiva Achanami. Here too in our Mishnah, the Kriya was Be'ezras Noshim, and there you're allowed to sit. Meisvei, the Gemara says it's really true that the Kriyas HaTorah took place in the Ezras Noshim. What about the following brisa? Now this brisa is addressing the Kriya of the Melech once every 7 years in Parshas Hakel, Eichen Korimbo. Where would the king read from the Sefer Torah? So now we're up to the Tanakama Shita B'Azora. And the Gemara understands that the Azora means the Mokom Mekudosh Ahoyo Ruyo Le'avoda, the Ezras Yisrael, the Ezras Kohanim. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov Omer B'Harbayis. Okay, then the Melech would read not in the Azora, but in the Harabayis. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is going to derive this from a pasuk in Nehemiah Perek Ches, the same chapter that we mentioned before. But we want to square with the Tanakama, who indicates quite explicitly that the Kriya of the Melech from the Sefer Torah in Hakel took place in the Azora. Rabbi Eliezer derives it Shenemar, because it says, here we turn to Mem Aleph, Vayikra bo lifnei harachov asher lifnei shar hamayim. So again, according to Tanakama, they read it in the Azor. I'm sorry, the Melech read Hakel in the Azor. And the Gemara, by analogy, equates the Kriyas Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim to that of the Melech at Hakel, and it was all in the Azor, according to Tanakama. And therefore, back to our question, how could he have sit here? Omer Rav Chizda Ezras Noshim. What the Tanakama had in mind when it said Azora was not the Azora of Ezras Yisrael, Ezras Kohanim, but rather Ezras Noshim. And the pasuk says he read in it before the plaza, which is before the Watergate. Okay, the old Watergate problem. So it says in the pasuk, and Ezra brought forth the Torah before the congregation of men and women. So the public reading of the Torah was not performed in the structure of the Beis Hamikdash itself, but outside the Beis Hamikdash, before the plaza, which is before the Watergate. And Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov adduces this pasuk to prove that the reading took place on Harabayis. And just as Ezra's public reading of the Torah was arranged there, so too that of the Melech, or for that matter, the Kohen Gadol, was arranged there. The Tanakama will maintain that the reading of the Melech of the Kohen Gadol took place inside the Mikdash, unlike the Kriya of Ezra. So again, we finish with Amar of Chizda be Ezras Noshim. What the Brisa means by Azara, it means the Ezras Noshim. And our mission, although it doesn't specify where the reading took place, it only indicates that it was in some area where the Kohen Gadol is allowed to sit, The reference is to the Ezras Noshim. This is where we'll stop for today. Eretz Hashem, continue tomorrow. 7:50, right?